It started here, 5:02 p.m., but I think we might be one short of quorum. We have 13. We need 13, there's 12. So, 1. 9. 9. 9, 10, 11, 12, jeez. All right.
Annie is supposed to be here.
Okay. Just wait.
Yeah, maybe we wait a second.
We'll just wait. We're going to wait a little bit until we get quorum. We need one more. I think Annie's supposed to be here soon, so. Meeting at 5:04 p.m. Welcome, everybody. Good to see everybody. Sorry I wasn't here last time, but here now. So, let's see here. Should we hold off on taking roll call or just do it now? We can add Annie later. Okay. All righty. Let's see. Nick Acevedo? Absent. This should be it here, yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Virginia's here, right? All right. Dennis Baker's here. Curtis Black. Jim Carlson, yes, here. Yep. Jim, hey. And there's our quorum. All right. Fantastic.
You're a quorum.
Nice. Awesome. Annie is not here. Susan DeSantis. Chuck Ebner. Excused. I'm here. Rita Goldberg. Here. Hey, Rita. Let's see here. Arlene is absent. Excused. David Gooder. David, thanks for being here. Lynn Hackman. Excused. Laird Hayes is here. Ruth Kobayashi. Excused. Scott Laidlaw. Here. Hey, Scott. Katie Love. Tony is not here. Last I checked on Facebook, he was in New York. Let's see. Thomas Meng. All right. Jim Mosier's here. Amber Snyder's here. Debbie Stevens. Hey, Debbie. Christy Walker. All right. Hi, Christy. And Paul Watkins is here. Okay. We do have a quorum. Okay. Any public comments on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we will move to current business, section 4 on the agenda. Meeting minutes of June 4th. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the caveat of the changes provided by Mr. Mosier? Okay, thanks, Paul. Do we have a second? All right, Jim, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'll abstain because I was absent. Okay. Okay, item B under section 4 of current business, draft recreation element and draft natural resources element. These are attachments 2 and 3. So these are draft elements. I will get you the page number in a second. Turn it over to you. Okay.
And let the record reflect that Committee Member Clarity is here and attending. Thank you for coming. So as the agenda narrative states, the Recreation Natural Resources Subcommittee met in May, on May 15th, and I am proud to identify Committee Member Baker as the chair of that subcommittee. Committee Member Baker, Mr. Chair of the subcommittee, I would have you make any comments you'd like after I finish my introduction. We do have Asha from Dudek, who is here to make a presentation as well. Dennis, you're not alone in this. But you are welcome to provide any sort of recap comments on the subcommittee, as well as sort of what the subcommittee focused on, although Asha will go over that. So if you'd like her to go first, we can do that as well. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody else stood there. No, everybody else stepped back, and I was slow. So that's what happened. The reason I thought I'd go first is just because my comments are pretty limited. I have the two elements in front of me that were redlined, and the recreation element, most of the changes have to do with inserting the word reasonable, and some of us wanted to change older adults to seniors, so that was a very important change. And the reasonable comes about because we have an attorney on our committee that is very, very adept at reviewing these things, and he's always wanting to squeeze in a little bit of wiggle room. That attorney will go unidentified. But every committee should have an attorney, because I do compliment him on his really diving into every one of them and not only making very productive and constructive comments, but even catching things like spelling errors and bad grammar and stuff. So thank you, unnamed attorney. So that was the recreation element. The natural resources element, which is in the same committee, again, there was a lot of reasonablies inserted, but I brought a visual aid so you can see there's a lot of red on this. So this was the red line deal, but most of the red is in the overview, so we kind of rewrote or encouraged the rewriting of the overview. And then the rest of it was smaller word changes and some minor things, and she may be touching on those. I'm not going to go through it. If anybody's interested in seeing the red line, I don't mind sharing it. So that's my comments.
And I'd be glad, Mr. Chair, to transmit and share the red line as well, but I figured that to eliminate confusion, we wanted to provide you a clean version with your agenda packet. But as touched upon by the subcommittee chair, a lot of the changes were wordsmithing for the most part, and the policy direction that was received with the feedback that we asked for, Asha will be going through in her presentation. So I'd go ahead and invite Asha to start at this time.
Thank you so much. Hello? Okay, there we go. And Bendy, can you move to the first slide, please? Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. So thank you so much, Committee Member Baker, for that overview. And we'll start with the recreation element. There are some key focus areas that we wanted to highlight for today. And those are new parks and connections that increase resident access to recreation, parks, and open space opportunities. Highlighting that the need for parks and recreational facilities that are adapted to meet a variety of needs for both existing and future residents, and then really protecting the public beach access. So these are kind of some of the key focus areas, and we have a few policies we're going to go through today to highlight. And next slide, please. Okay, so starting with new parks and connections. Through this process, we worked with the subcommittee, as was mentioned before, on some wordsmithing. So, for example, a couple of these policies read to evaluate, for example, R-3.3 read, evaluate open space acreage and park type classifications, and so forth. And it was recommended to add continually evaluate. So that was a change that came out of the subcommittee meeting. And that goes the same for R-3.5, adding continually evaluate. And then I wanted to just bring attention to policy R-3.4, because we are recognizing that the Parks Master Plan planning process has been really fruitful for a lot of similar jurisdictions, and can really help take a little bit of a deeper dive into parks, but comprehensively citywide. But we didn't want to commit the city to that. So you can see that it reads, consider establishing a park master plan to comprehensively assess and plan for park needs. So that's something that could be considered for the future. And then I'll just bring your attention to the last policy, prevent to the extent possible any net loss of parkland or open space. And again, just highlighting some wordsmithing that we did there with the subcommittee to add to the extent possible to allow some flexibility. And then meeting a variety of needs. So this is really important to meet new state legislation. There are state mandates that need to be met by January 1 of 2026, that all jurisdictions within the state need to really be assessing the accessibility of parks and open space, and that it is meeting a variety of needs. So wanted to highlight a couple of policies here. Develop design standards for parks that are reasonably adaptive to extreme heat. And again, want to just note that that was another wordsmithing that we made, adding the word reasonably to again allow that flexibility. And then policy R-5.4, develop reasonable design standards to ensure Americans with Disabilities Act compliant accessibility, the ADA accessibility. This is really important to make sure that we're covering, all the variety of generations. And to Baker's point, we wanted to make sure, you won't see the terms here, but there was an acknowledgement of making sure that we're swapping older adults for seniors too. So we did that throughout as well. Okay, and then a few more on the meeting a variety of needs. So policy R-5.6, use reasonable efforts to improve cooling centers with resilience improvements, such as battery backup power and amenities that help promote a sense of community and socialization. So when it comes to the cooling centers, once again, we wanted to make sure that we're adding in that little bit of flexibility. So wordsmithing to say reasonable, and then before it sort of read resilience improvements and called for battery backup power and so forth, but we added the such as, once again, to kind of bring in some flexibility. The next policy, we did a little wordsmithing as well. It used to read, pilot a cool pavement program essentially. And so through the committee, we added consider creating a pilot cool pavement program. And that just helps to reduce the effects of extreme heat. And then the next policy.
Asha, may I interrupt you?
Go ahead.
Can you tell the committee what cool pavement is?
Yeah, sure. So the cool pavement is there's sort of an index on the level of how the sun hits the pavement and whether it's a lighter color, darker color. And if you have cool pavements, then generally speaking, it will reduce what's called like the urban heat island effect, if you guys are familiar with it. But essentially those really urban spaces that can be dark in color, that can really take the heat and then make the space a lot warmer. So if you transition to cooler pavements, that in essence will start to create cooler temperatures for everyone in more urban settings. And happy to give any more insight if people have further questions, but that's generally the idea, and it has been found to be really successful. So hopefully that helps provide some context to that. And then, just the last policy. So sort of similar to cool pavement, obviously tree canopy is really essential to keeping spaces cool during extreme heat. And so we have this policy, use reasonable efforts to evaluate tree canopy cover in parks and public right-of-way, considering shade and priority active transportation corridors. So essentially in a lot of park spaces, we'll just see, a lack of trees or shade coverings, even in playground areas or things like that. And you can really feel the sun in those areas. So the idea is to kind of assess all over in the various different parks to see where tree canopy really should be considered. And in addition, there are some very effective sort of shading tools that you can use as well beyond just trees. I'm sure you guys have seen some of those, but and you can kind of leverage that technology once again over like playground areas or areas where you're going longer stretches without any sort of relief from the sun. So that's the idea there.
I'm not sure if this is in there, but I think that we should be more specific in terms of the list of approved trees that can go in parkways, and start to focus less on palm trees that don't provide any shade and more on trees that do provide shade to help people with the sidewalks and everything, not just the city property.
Please, Dennis.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the cool pavement aspect. One of the things that we're already doing, which helps in that aspect, is we use concrete. I don't know whether we will always use concrete, but I know I had my alleys were replaced, and they were concrete, and they replaced them with concrete. And concrete is much more reflective than asphalt. So we're already doing, a good thing, at least in our alleys, and some of our streets have concrete.
That's awesome. I'm curious, do they have like a list of trees that they might use, or that the city's been using beyond? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That's great. That's a
the
great
city
point.
maintains a street tree inventory and an approved planting list, so I think that's an apt comment that we can look to revisit that and make sure that we are providing shade canopy opposed to something that's just decorative as you see out there on the street right now.
Please, Debbie.
Testing, okay. Just a quick comment on this, and we run into this all the time, and it came up on Ocean Boulevard, Ocean Avenue. So sometimes the trees versus the views are a bit of an issue. So some of the parks, we need to think about that. Most of the Ocean Avenue modifications got rid of or did not go along with a whole lot of trees because it would start to block views. So I think the way this is worded, that would be covered, but just a comment.
I think it's mostly pine trees there now, isn't it? On Ocean? You're talking about in CDM?
There's all kinds, but they were going to. I mean, one of the thoughts was to add shade areas, and it didn't go over very well. Let's put it that way.
Understood. All right. Please.
And then I'm assuming, but I just want to make the comment that if we choose a tree, it has to be one that doesn't take a lot of water because we're in a drought. And so I assume that's already in the mix of thought. Okay.
Good point.
Yeah, really good comments. Thank you. And I'll just mention that we are covering the natural resources element today as well. And these two work, hand in hand. And so a lot of these things will be addressed also in the natural resources element. When we get there, I'll make sure to highlight that. All right. Okay, next slide. So public beach access. So once again, you can see, I'll highlight some of the wordsmithing that we did, but in the first policy, we added use reasonable efforts to ensure the preservation and enhancement of public beaches for public recreation. In the second policy, conduct a periodic assessment of at-risk beach access points to determine risk of damage or impairment from coastal hazards, including flooding and erosion. And this kind of wordsmithing was to add a periodic assessment to kind of better and bolster the policy. And then the next policy, maintain reasonable beach access points to continue providing adequate public access to the beach and coastal resources. Again, adding that word reasonable. And then the last policy there, identify appropriate, reasonable sites for beach nourishment and replenishment, living shoreline restoration, and built structures as part of a comprehensive sea level rise adaptation plan. And this actually concludes the recreation policies that we have highlighted today. So do we want to open the floor for any other comments?
Dennis, please.
There's in 7.4, there's a word, it's maintain reasonable perpendicular, to my fellow chair member, Paul Watkins. It was the concern, and this is as an explanation to everybody, as I'm sure most everybody here knows, we have a boardwalk that goes down a certain distance into West Newport, and then what happens after that is it's just sand. There's no more boardwalk, and the West Newport residents, of which Paul is one of them, are always concerned about the extension of that boardwalk. And so the word here, I haven't heard any, and I'm open to correction, but I haven't heard any heavy lobbying saying we got to run the boardwalk all the way down. There's some people who would like to, but my concern always is access. So if people can get there perpendicular, that's okay with me. I don't have a problem with that. And Paul may have an additional comment on that, but that word's missing. That change was from the committee.
Yeah, I think Jim Mosier would tell us that might be the proper word is vertical, if that's accurate. Perpendicular works for me, but I think technically is it vertical access?
That's correct, Mr. Watkins. It's vertical and lateral access. So
Okay.
we would prefer vertical being recognized there.
Yeah, our comment always was that beyond 36th Street down to the Santa Ana River, that there may be an opportunity for a little bit different beach experience from the activity that's on the boardwalk to the pier from 36th Street. Well, actually all the way to short of the wedge. So that was our comment. And thank you for that good comment, Dennis.
Okay. Please.
Hi, Chuck Fancher. R75 ties excellent objectives as being part of a sea level rise adoption plan. I suggest that might be limiting, because many other things contribute to the need for beach replenishment and the loss of sand and the loss of habitat. It's not just sea rise, and it might be helpful just to add a simple phrase of, as part of a comprehensive sea level rise adoption plan and natural erosion. It's not just sea level rise that drives this.
Good point. Any comments on that? Jim, please.
Yeah, I have a comment. It's not on Chuck's comment. It's on the discussion about this policy R7.4 about maintaining beach access. And the subcommittee chair may not be aware, we were asked to submit additional comments after the subcommittee meeting, and I submitted extensive comments on this. And one of them was suggesting changing perpendicular to vertical, but I also suggested maybe we take out the word entirely, because if you see the policy says maintain reasonable beach access points to continue, maybe it should just say maintain reasonable beach access, because we want to maintain both vertical and lateral access. We don't want to encourage new development that blocks people moving along the beach, so I'm not sure why we're only interested in preserving the vertical access or perpendicular to the beach things. My suggestion was to change perpendicular to the more proper word vertical, but somebody at DUDEC seems to have taken the comment to heart, and so that's the reason the word is missing.
Thanks, Jim. Please, Rita.
Okay. My comment is actually more on the recreation. That was the original discussion. And first of all, you guys did an amazing job on this. It really addressed all the points, and I think it's fabulous. Did you, during your discussions at all, talk about or consider establishing a website for court reservations? A lot of cities do that, and residents welcome it because they can show up to their tennis or pickleball court or whatever and know that it's theirs for the hour, even if they have to pay a nominal fee. They're so happy not to have to sit there and wait around until something becomes available. So I was just wondering if that came up at all as part of the recreation plan.
Didn't come up? Well,
If I can
Please go
address
ahead.
that, Mr. Chair. So thank you for the comment, Committeemember Goldberg. I think that gets into more of a very granular level implementation of the general plan. I would say that there's a goal that talks about high quality recreation programs. So I think that if it was the pleasure of the committee, we could look to incorporate something about technology, something just to encourage technology as it advances to help facilitate proper use of the recreational programs. I mean, we do have things about, just for example, like informing the community about upcoming events and maintaining high quality programming, but there's nothing in there about leveraging technology or ensuring that we're effectively and efficiently managing our recreational assets. So I don't know if that's something that the subcommittee and the committee would like to talk about further, but that's not explicitly in here.
No, I think, I would like to have that come back to the committee, and we could kick that on. That there's a lot of, that opens up a whole other deal, but we might be able to come up with like a general statement, which you were kind of going around there, because there's sometimes people find niches, and I'm thinking of like in LA with the golf courses, where there was for years and years and years, and then somebody found out how to game the system. So maybe putting that in there now would be something that a future council could fall back on it if it became an issue, or might be able to use to introduce some kind of a reservation system.
Thank you. Virginia, please.
This is a general question. I'm new to the general committee. I just became a member. In our doing the general plan, we're creating this overview, the policy, the goals, right? Who creates the implementation? Is that something that is our next phase so that we are making sure things like that are addressed, or how does it work?
You are. You're going to create the implementation plan.
Oh, good.
Just you.
I'm so happy.
No, I'm kidding. Jenny, that's a great
Because
question.
I have ideas.
No, part of, sorry for being humorous, but I think levity is important in government. Appreciate you humoring me. So the implementation plan is part and integral to the general plan. So we're going to have the goals and policies, and then as you see in the parentheses in the draft element, that references a specific action. So we'll have a table that has those actions, such as creating a reservation system, for example, if that were something they wanted to do. But ultimately, you all would provide input on those implementing actions. And as we've talked about previously, there is an important reformatting to be had of that document that will have the implementing actions as well as the responsible and supporting departments and the timeline for implementation. So just want to make it clear that you all will be providing input on that.
Something has also been suggested in some of the subcommittees, I hope that the General Plan Advisory Committee will address at one point, was having more continuity from the people who created the policies to be sure that the policies are actually being followed. And we will have the implementation plan with staff, but it might be good, staff gets very busy, to have someone, and we're not talking about every month or anything, but maybe an annual review of certain elements to make sure that they're moving on. That's been one of the things that's been suggested. Okay.
Yeah, good point. Please, David.
Speaking of reformatting and continuity, had two things. One was, continuity. I noticed that, especially in the recreation element, it varies considerably from the previous version. We have, for instance, the first section is it's not even in the, from the old one, it's not even the new one. And I'd also like to recommend can we revise the table in here, table 1, in the projected park need by service area, to be more similar to what was in the parkland acreage needs in the last one, specifically breaking out beach acreage. That is huge in this city, and if that's included in the parks, it's kind of confusing to me as to how we go from a deficit of 40 acres in the city to a overabundance of 151 just in this plan. And also maybe add footnotes into this. How did Harborview go from 99 acres to 103? What changes were from the last plan to this one? I think it'd be good to add some footnotes from clarity and specifications for this.
This is the chart that's on page 2, right, of the packet? I'm reading this to say, and tell me if I'm wrong, is this saying that the far left side of 2045 is saying this is how much park space we're going to need in the future in addition, on top of the number that's in the middle, right?
Right. You're seeing a projected need off to the left, and then the existing as of 2024 is right in the middle.
Okay. And you're saying to revise that chart to make it easier to read, right?
Yeah, just make it more similar to, I think what was done in the previous element was very clear. This one is not very clear.
Thank you. Good point. I'm curious, real quick, Paul. How do people reserve now when it comes to pickleball courts? You just show up and you sign up on a sheet?
No, you put
Your name?
in a thing, and then if there's 20 behind you or ahead of you, just wait.
Can I tell you, I went up and played there one time. It was pretty intense. I won't go back. I took up golf. So, thanks. Please, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, to Rita's good point, it seems to me that when this is forwarded to Sean Levin and his team, that we might point out specifically the fact that in our GPAC discussion, there was an allusion to court reservation and that kind of issue. I don't know whether, as you say, that might be a little bit more granular than we need to address here in the general plan, but certainly Sean could look at that. If he hasn't already, my guess is there's some kind of a formal reservation program. If not, that ought to be mentioned that it was of concern to GPAC. And secondly, I like the idea of somewhere weaving in evolving technology and how important that is in the scheme of things, particularly for recreation. So perhaps there could be a mention of that if it isn't already in there, Asha. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. All right. Please, Scott.
I just have one thing going back to policies. Essentially, there's R 5.3, 5.4, which address the accessibility issues. And I think, unlike a lot of these other things, we're really, really stuck with federal and state law on those things. So I appreciate the committee's effort to provide flexibility in the guidelines, but those might be a couple of the policies that need to be more firm, because it is a requirement that we comply with federal and state law, and it exposes the city to significant liability if you don't. So there's a very, very active, program of lawsuits and so forth associated with. So it isn't really up to the city to decide what the rules of accessibility are. It's already been established. And so, I'm not necessarily pushing that. I just know that those are the rules and you have to follow them. You don't really have a choice for any kind of public improvements. So those policies, those specific policies might need to be firmed up just a little bit.
No, good point, Scott. And I think Ruth actually submitted a pretty helpful letter on this too with the packet, if folks were able to see that. So thank you. Virginia, please.
So I don't know, I was going to comment on this in the nature element, but when I read this, and I've been told that, and please, explain this better than I might not be understanding it, that things that are under the state or federal law, we're omitting that because it's like done deal. But at the same time, for the public that reads this, they need to know that's why we didn't talk about it. Because like in the methane issues, there are state laws that are regulations that determine what we do with abandoned wells. And, and this is all kind of established for our benefit, for our health benefit. But at the same time, we don't really talk about methane that much, or we don't have a policy about it, or abandoned wells. And I'm thinking that even if we just, in some ways, like for the abandoned wells, the policy for abandoned wells is in the state code. We will follow the state code or whatever, and then just reference it. You don't have to explain things, but at least we are not, but have some way to link it. Because of the technology we have nowadays, it'll be easy for them to tap on it and go and find out what the regulation is. I just feel like there's so many things in this that disturb me.
Ben, would there be a way of doing some kind of appendix or doing some kind of a supplemental, rather than trying to list everything in the general plan saying as per designated by state law. That like just muck up everything, I think. But that there's some place in the document where we recognize in the document that there are state laws pertaining, and I think her example is really good, because we do have methane seeps, we have capped oil wells, we have all kinds of good stuff like that. And as far as I know, I don't think we're touching on that in the general plan, nor necessarily should we. But that would just be maybe a possible approach to that, where we cover it in a supplemental part of the document, as opposed to try and put everything into the main document. And it's a little bit to Scott's point too, I think, to where.
And so we can work with Dudek on that, but I think that the existing conditions and background analysis reports probably have some of those federal references and state references, and that would be hyperlinked through the general plan and referenced in the physical copy of the general plan as a document that sort of serves as the informational component behind everything that provides that context. So I do think there's a way to make sure that that's there, and it would be inside that existing conditions and background analysis report.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So that's true. That would be an appendix, so that it wouldn't be embedded within the element itself, but it will be an accessible appendix that somebody could reference. And then you also have the CEQA document that's going to go through all the applicable legislation and show, and demonstrate that the city's meeting that. So you'll have that document as well. But I did want to just note to Virginia's point that there are some state laws that actually require you to go into the general plan element and put policies in place. And it's not just, we rely on that state law. It's actually a law that says you have to go in and put these policies in. So it kind of depends on the legislation. But some of the points that you were making are for the natural resources element. So we'll get into that. We'll make it into the next slides. But I did want to just highlight that it kind of depends on the legislation, what we can do.
What do you mean? Sounds like what you're saying. Well, it means what we can leave out, and what we have to put in, right? But at the same time, the public, when they read this, if like I live in Newport Shores, right next to what was Banning Ranch and the oil fields, and to find out there's 33 abandoned wells there without the statement that it's been sealed, and that was concerning to me, because I know that as an area of methane release. And then also you have to have my understanding from reading this is that if you just seal it and not have some way of managing the pressure that builds up under there, then you can have an explosion. So it's important to me that we are able to produce a document that not only pleases our council, but that the public can read and feel like they have their issues addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I was referring to other pieces of legislation because I just want to make sure for context that I agree with you, and I think it's sort of case by case. So one example is SB 1425. That requires that we go into the recreation element and actually include policies about accessibility to a variety of users and things like that. So with that legislation, we actually have to go in and put in the policy, and OPR and the state is going to be looking for that. But to your point, there are other pieces of legislation that we don't necessarily have to do that, but we will certainly have the background materials and documents in an appendix and accessible with all that information. So it's a combination.
If it's an appendix and not referenced in the general plan, will they know to go there? Will they be able to? It'll be connected, right?
Yes, absolutely. It'll be connected. And we're going to get more into, I think, some of your issues in the natural resources element too, so we can dig into that a little bit more.
Speaking of which, can we move to the natural resources element? Thanks. Good comments, everybody.
Yeah, it's great comments.
Mr. Mosher, please. Jim.
I'm not sure how urgent the time is. I did have some comments on this. if there's anybody here who has not had the opportunity to attend one of the subcommittee meetings, that they may not understand that in the 1 or 2 hours of the meeting, it's not possible for the subcommittee members to review all of the policies that you're seeing in these printouts. And actually, they see usually just a very few selected policies to comment on. And after the meeting, as I said, I submitted comments after reviewing the entire thing. One, as an example, one of the policies that was not reviewed at the subcommittee meeting that I noticed was Recreation Policy 2.2, which at that time committed the city to creating senior programs that would be self-sustaining in nature, covering all the direct expenses and the administrative overhead costs, which meant that any senior recreation program the seniors participating would have to pay the full cost. And that seemed contrary to how other recreation programs work. So one of the comments was questioning why we were doing that. And I see in the draft we have today, it's been reduced to create senior programs that are financially sustainable rather than the seniors will bear all the overhead costs. So that's fine. There were a number of other comments, though, and unless it was a particular wordsmithing correction, which almost all of those were incorporated, the more general comments of that sort were rarely had any effect. So the question is, I don't know how many other people submitted comments or how many members of the public will. What happens to those comments? Are they still pending? Are they rejected? Or what? Among the comments, for instance, expanding on David's point, I thought it's really important to kind of understand how the proposed element compares to the current one, and specifically the table he was commenting on. I noticed it has a horizon year of 2045, and I thought we were working towards a horizon year of 2050, so that comment has not yet had any effect. And on the previous page, it's anticipating by 2045 or 2050, whatever, the population of Newport Beach is only going to increase by 6,000 people, and yet we're planning to add 10,000 or more dwelling units. So is that realistic? And so that sort of comment has not yet been addressed. And have those been rejected, or will they be? Are they still inactive or not? That's kind of the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. I appreciate that. So for these drafts, we incorporated all of the wordsmithing edits as you picked up upon. I did share your comments with the task lead at DUDEC, which is Rose, for consideration, because a lot of them were more questions than they were comments on direct changes here in the document. So I did forward them to her to look into so that we could present that back. I would just remind you all that these are progress drafts. They're not something that is being solidified through your action today. However, I will acknowledge and agree that it probably would have been beneficial to provide your full comments as an attachment to this agenda packet. So for that, I apologize. But I would say that, again, all of the wordsmithing and edits that were more curtailing back, such as you picked up upon the seniors bearing the total overhead costs, I agree that that seemed unreasonable and counterproductive to what we were, the direction that council had taken previously. So I did make that change as an example.
Yeah, I didn't want to make it personal that I'm being offended because I don't know how many other people put in comments. It seems kind of like in EIR, when people make a comment, maybe there should be a response to the comment. So you know whether it's been, whether it's going to lead to some result or is being dismissed, and if it's being dismissed, why it's being dismissed.
I think that let's just say that you will, from now on, when you get something like that, make an attachment so that everybody can see, and then the committee as a whole can, or the subcommittee, if it goes back to them first, can react to it.
Yes, and then another general comment that I did not make, but like David, looking at the existing plan, it had very specific anticipation of what new recreation facilities would be needed, and the currently drafted plan is extremely vague as to even whether we need any. It's kind of saying we already have more than we need for the population, the modest population growth we're expecting. Most of these things that were projected actually happened, and shouldn't we be perhaps thinking about where we will need new facilities and kind of clarifying what areas of the city we expect the population growth to be in, and accommodate that. Seems like that's the purpose of a general plan.
Thanks, Jim. Good comments. Thank you. Please.
Okay, do you want me to address these, or do we want to move on? Okay, so just quickly, we still have the land use element, for example, that's going to come forward, and that does indicate, areas where the growth is going to happen, and we will be making sure that all the elements are, there's continuity between, but we do very much appreciate the comments, and I'll make sure to circle back with Rose on our team too, to see what the plan is for those higher level strategic comments.
Do we have a population estimate that we're working towards for 2050? It seems hard to have a general plan if we don't know what we're planning for.
Yeah, we did have projections in the land use element, and a lot of it is tied to the housing element as background. So the intention is to make them consistent, so we'll go back and verify that. But I do appreciate the comments. And one little aside I would say is related to providing responses to comments. Candidly, the comments you made were very technical and were complicated, so we didn't have time to address all of them prior to this meeting. So I appreciate your patience, and we will definitely circle back once, as Asha said, Rose has had a chance to review your comments.
Okay, great. And if we want to go to the next slide, we can get into the natural resources element. Okay, so here we have 4 key focus areas: electric vehicle charging infrastructure, the orderly transition of oil and gas resources, electrification, and habitats in parks and public open space. So next slide, please. Okay, relative to electric vehicle EV infrastructure, we have these 3 policies we're highlighting today. So creating public and private partnerships to provide EV charging stations at visitor lodging and popular tourist destinations. And I'll highlight that there was some wordsmithing there done with the committee. We originally had increasing EV charging, but again, wanting to provide kind of a little more flexibility. It just says to provide EV charging, so that way there's not the commitment. And then the next policy, NR 2.2, is regarding the identification, prioritization, and incentivizing installation of EV charging stations. And we added in there an appropriate number of EV charging stations. And then the third policy, we added, based on identified demand, encourage additional electric boat charging stations. So whereas where it read before was sort of just indicating that the city was committing to installing additional, this helps to kind of provide more context that it will be based on demand and not just necessarily installing and increasing to do so. So wanted to just highlight those changes. And then regarding the transition of oil and gas resources, want to highlight this policy. So if deemed appropriate, engage with community members and interest groups in the phase-out analysis process. And this next part was added through the committee meeting. The city should monitor and proactively address implementation of California laws to facilitate a sustainable transition and dependable revenue streams. So this gets maybe a little bit to Virginia's point, but this is the policy on the transition of oil and gas resources. And then we can go through them all if you want and then kind of come back for comments. Does that sound good? So electrification incentives. So here, for the most part, we had these policies in place, and then we added, again, some wordsmithing to the extent reasonable, as appropriate. But I'll just kind of run through them. You can see one is regarding a schedule for replacing the city vehicle fleet. The next is relative to installing solar panels on public facilities. The third here is performing outreach and raising awareness. And lastly, we have expanding ordinances requiring electric landscaping equipment.
Just looking at the language, I want to go back to something Paul Watkins had suggested, that this is awfully repetitious. And is there something, we had talked about doing something in an introduction that explained that this was everything that, unless it said otherwise specifically, this was extent reasonable and appropriate. So that's something to at least consider, some language there, so we wouldn't have to have every single sentence like that. But then when you didn't have that, you might have something that was saying this is mandatory when we have to be mandatory.
Thank you, Nancy. No, I think Nancy's point is a good one. It does seem to me that we need to, qualify things, particularly if there's governmental suggestions about electrification or, we need to qualify the absolute encouragement, in my view, of electrification where in light of reality, frankly, of political and otherwise. But to your comment, Nancy, if we need to consider getting in touch with the city attorney, Yolanda or Aaron or someone, and at some point have that global introductory language in the general plan, I'm certainly in favor of that, and we can therefore be a little bit more flexible on the qualifiers and the language. So, however it's going to be addressed, maybe Ben has an idea on when we get to that point, when we finally have a chance to talk to Yolanda or Aaron on a global qualifier as to good faith, reasonableness, appropriateness, that kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ben?
I know we've talked about this before, and I believe Steering Committee Chair Gardner has suggested putting it on an agenda to talk about, and I'm not sure if that's still of interest, but I think that would be reasonable and appropriate to do so. So I think that at a future agenda, it would be good to sort of have that discussion and determine whether a preamble is the way to go, or if you want to have these sort of repetitive clarifying statements. As I think I mentioned at a prior meeting, I did connect with the city attorney's office regarding the general plan, and they will ultimately review it. However, they would prefer to review as it gets closer, and I don't know if that will be too late in the timing, but I do agree that coming up with maybe a more global approach is better than doing these individual statements that are repeating over and over again. But I think you're making your point that we want to soften some of the language, and that's why we're leaving it in there as it is today.
Super quick, I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that you want to go completely all electric with all city vehicles is what it looks like it's going to transition to. Let's talk about the possibility of a grid outage, blackouts, stations not available for city workers charging, etc. Should this be something that we consider hybrid mixed in with, fuel efficient mixed in with electric, and not just put all our eggs in one basket with everything going electric? I think that's really, I don't think it's a very good idea.
I think that's a fair point. I would even say instead of replacing, it would just say adding. So you could say adding city vehicles that consider electric or hybrid or whatever. Yeah. Please.
Testing. Chuck Fancher. I see that this approach is talking about alternate fuel vehicles, and as we should, and focusing on electrification. But there are electric vehicles that are fueled by hydrogen gas, and I happen to own one of them. but I'm not trying to advocate it for my purposes, but to point out that the recharging stations for electricity, there are also recharging stations for hydrogen gas, and there's a need to push more of them out. And whether or not that is a workable economic answer will be borne out in time, but in big trucks and recycled big trucks and buses, they're finding that hydrogen gas is just like, works just like gasoline. You just go to the pump, you fill up in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you're full, and you go on. And they have, a longer range, whereas electricity in large vehicles are battery intensive, which have a great deal of weight and take up space. And there's a point where it's not so effective for electrification in certain vehicles. We're limiting this discussion to just one type of fuel. And I'm just suggesting that in the contemporary world, there are alternate fuels out there that might just be noted only to say, and other fuel and other fuel opportunities that are proving to be commercially reasonable.
Thanks, Chuck. Good point. Yeah, David, please.
I'd like to propose also adding maybe a term financially feasible to this, to these sentences. The appraisal world, that's part of how a property is functionable. And that's something, you can wish what you want, but if it's not financially feasible, it's not going to happen. And especially when it comes to electricity, we talk about the demand side. You also have to think about the supply side. How much additional funds are going to be needed to get your distribution system improved? You can want all the plug-in charging stations you want, but if the grid can't handle it, they're not going to be there.
Yeah, fair point.
Yes, I don't want the word add. I feel that California is moving to alternative fuels that reduce greenhouse gases, okay? And I think that in some ways, if we can put, kind of make it vague so that we can, but we should also relate to the fact that in California, we're moving towards electric cars and, the hydrogen and to reduce this greenhouse gases. So, I understand that we use compressed natural gas, and that's better than gasoline. That was one step, but it's a step towards reduce, then we'll go to the next step. So somehow, if we can put innovation, if we can put, alternative energy sources, if we can do it in such a way that we don't destroy the thought that we need to get rid of the pollutants in our air, our smog, then I think that we need to do that. Thanks.
I think what Chuck suggested is a good idea. That's just saying alternative sources. That gives us a wide range, and who knows what's going to come up. Maybe we'll start doing it by sunshine.
Fair point. And to David's point, too, about it being feasible for market and for financial as well. Okay. Dennis, please.
Yeah, one of the really difficulties, which I think we're all aware of, is in this area in particular, but some of the other areas, it's really hard to foresee the next 10 years, much less the horizon that we've set for ourselves. So, and I'm going to use an example since we were talking about electric charging. So the city of LA, I drive electric chargeable, okay. So the city of LA jumped in very early on and installed all these Department of Water and Power charging stations. The problem is they all died very quickly and didn't work. And then what caught up is the commercial aspect. So that where you're paying, and because the ones that LA put in were free. But anyhow, so my point with that is that the industry now is starting to mature, specifically in the charging networks. People are making money at it. They're putting in systems and stuff like that. Sometimes that happens a lot quicker than we realize, and other times it dies out and another path comes up, such as Chuck was saying about hydrogen. 10 years from now, everybody might be going like, geez, we were driving electric vehicles. You know, I love my new hydrogen vehicle. So the point is, I honestly don't have an answer how to do that. Maybe DUDEC does, maybe they do. How do we give ourselves the flexibility to deal with those changes in the technology that are going to be 15 years out or 10 years out or even 5 years out, and still make a plan that's going out 30 years or 20 years, you know, whatever we're shooting for. And I don't have an answer to that. I'm just posing it more as a challenge.
Good point, Dennis. Okay.
Hello. I know we're also managing, you know, the state, California state's expectations and requirements and mandates. So they do have a, you know, zero emission mandate in effect. So maybe we can continue to kind of think on what that terminology would be, but to allow some flexibility for innovations beyond electric vehicles. That's a great comment. Thank you.
Wasn't that just overturned essentially federally, the zero?
He's working on it. He's working on it.
Doesn't it seem logical that we remain fluid and flexible, whether it's in a year or 10 years or 20 or 50? We can't predict what's going to happen. We can't predict if the state can sustain the grid if we turn everything we can put in all the charging stations we want in Newport. Can the state sustain that? We don't know. So I think maybe we should look more at being a little bit more fluid and a little more being able to pivot when trends like the hydrogen thingy or whatever tend to come into play. So we're just not deadlocked into one thing, because I do have family that lives up in LA, and yeah, big fail. And by the way, a lot of the electric charging stations are fueled, if you will, by giant diesel plants. So it's not necessarily like super clean and just solar making that fun electricity to go in your car. There's a lot of other components. So I think we should stay more fluid with it as a city.
As she was speaking, I was thinking about the amendment process. Normally, we think about general plan amendments so that somebody can build something that they weren't planned to build it. That's where constantly we're getting general plan amendments, but isn't there, we also have the tools of amending the general plan for other reasons. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, Ben?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. So while the general plan is intended to be a long-term aspirational document suggesting the vision of the city, in 2050 in this case, as you all are touching upon, you can only go so far with your projections, and in some cases you do have to be reactionary. And so there is an ability for the city to come back, just as we do with the housing element on a requirement basis. We can come back and update these elements as we need to, if we need to update it to reflect changing conditions, emerging technology. But I do hear loud and clear and agree that wherever we can implement some level of flexibility, I think that would be a good play. And I think that ASHA and DUDEC are very well equipped to help incorporate some of that flexible language. But yes, to your point, Mr. Baker, we can nimbly and agilely update the general plan when it comes to policy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I made a note of that, and we will, really good comments. Thank you, everyone. This is very productive. So we'll go back on these policies and do some rework and see where we can allow that level of flexibility and innovation. Okay, and the next slide, habitats in parks and open space. So I did want to just point out that there is a state law, AB 1889, which does require local jurisdictions to discuss, identify, and analyze connectivity of habitat areas, wildlife movement, permeability, natural landscapes. So just to provide that context before we go into these policies, that a lot of these are set up to ensure that you are compliant with AB 1889. And so with that, so we've highlighted just a few here, working with local nurseries to highlight native and naturalized non-invasive species and discourage the sale of invasive species. I'll note that before we had prevent the sale of invasive species, we moved that through the subcommittee meeting to discourage, recognizing that that might be hard in implementation stages and to allow some flexibility there. And then the next policy, create or promote a yard habitat certification program. I'm sorry, we're missing a word there. Program encouraging landscaping practices that support native ecosystems. And the next policy, make reasonable efforts. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that one doesn't have the make reasonable efforts. So we have a couple of edits here. Apologies for that. It should read, make reasonable efforts to comply with the policies contained within the Orange County Natural Communities and Conservation Plan. And then similar to this next policy where you see make reasonable efforts to coordinate with California resources agencies. And then the next one as well should read, make reasonable efforts to support reforestation programs. But Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I don't have, maybe this is a later version, but I think it should read with that flexible language in there.
So the version of the element that's in the packet is what's on the screen here.
Okay.
So perhaps some of that language to make reasonable and appropriate was eliminated in some cases.
Okay, yeah, that's possible. Or maybe in a later comment was made, and there might have been later changes made. And that actually concludes the highlights of the two elements. So happy to answer any other questions or take any other comments.
I have a comment on that AB 1889. Can we cite some corridors we've got, like Buck Gully or other things in the city that actually exist, so we can also maybe steer people if they're interested to know exactly what corridors we have?
Quick question on 7.5 and 7.6. Was there any thought process that went into adding reasonableness to those two pieces, or this doesn't apply for that context?
We felt like this one was loose enough, and I think if we make it any more flexible, you might trigger OPR or the state picking up on that. So, because it's not making a commitment, it's just saying that, you are going to work with the local nurseries. And it's not preventing sale of invasive species, just discouraging. So, I mean, I think what we came to conclude is that it was loose enough, but happy to take more comments on that if
No, that makes sense, because then people would have to leave town to go get the plants if they really wanted them, right? Yeah, they have to go get the counterband, you know what I mean, to leave. Please.
Are we talking about policies in general? I mean, the floors. Okay. And then a quick question to Ben. Ben, as you know, I'm not on this committee, so as I try to get information here, like today, arriving here and this paper copy of these two is the first time I've seen these two elements in draft. And the point is, I know the Newport now is not a way for me to get into documents, as we talked about last time. And then I went to the website for today's meeting, the agenda, and it had the agenda from 2 meetings ago and attachments, but not this. How can I get access to these things in advance of your meetings?
So the agenda was posted. I think what you're referencing is there was a link on the calendar that was
Yes.
out of date, and I apologize for that. I noticed that right before we came here. But the agenda was actually updated on the General Plan Advisory Committee page. I'd be happy to add you to an interest list that gets that agenda.
Please, if you just put me on it, something where it comes to me, I would appreciate it.
And in the next agenda item, I'll talk a little more about next steps and sort of what to expect from a public outreach perspective that I think touches on your concern.
Thank you. Then I'd like to turn to in our policies in the 14 numbers on page 37 of our handout, sandy beaches. And I'd like to make some suggestions. One, I think that it's a redundant term to say sandy beaches, and because beaches are sand, and that maybe the heading here is beaches, just a suggestion. I'd like to suggest some additional phrase in sentence one and an additional policy. The phrase in sentence one would be possibly to read, beaches are sand environments. Beaches are sand environments and are at risk as a result of coastal development, comma, sea level, comma, and ever-present erosion stemming from natural nearshore settlement flows. That is the largest driver of the issue. And I think we ought to call it out and identify it. It's more valuable and pertinent than sea rise. And then the policy I'd like to suggest is that after 15.1, which is to work with regional governments, that there be a 15.2 that would read like this: pursue measures to replenish our beaches in the absence of effective regional projects. That is the current condition. That has been the condition for 16 years. And I think we ought to say, if we can't solve it regionally, let's take it on ourselves to do what we can to protect our beaches. That's the point of the suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. All right, Dennis, please.
I may be wrong, but I think I've been to some rocky beaches, but maybe they were misnamed. So I don't agree. I'd need to see some backup that says beaches are by definition sandy. But you could get that by rocky shores and sandy shores. So we could play with that if it was necessary. But I want to come to the thing of the corridors. I think it is of value in certain areas to point out what we have, and what I would do is encourage DUDEC to reach out to local people like the Newport Bay Conservancy, environmental groups, or California Department of Fish and Wildlife, because we do have Buck Gully. We do have actually a corridor that comes right near the 55 freeway in MacArthur. There's a corridor right there. And we have another corridor, the bay itself, and then we have a corridor in the Santa Ana River. So there are various nature corridors, but I would encourage DUDEC to reach out if we think it's valuable to include those specifics in it, to the point he was making. And I don't disagree. I actually agree with him.
Thanks, Dennis. Any further comments before we bring this to a vote to move this forward to the General Plan Update Steering Committee? Virginia, please.
And reading this all over again, these two areas, this was the discouragement of off-leash dogs near the river mouth. I was just wondering where that came from, and what is the real problem, because if they're on a leash, okay, I just don't know the dangers. Right. I mean, how are they going to romp in the water if you have them on a leash? And I'm a cat owner, so it's just not that I just don't know the dangers. Okay.
I'll trade you.
When you have an area, many times like Buck Gully or the beaches where you have the turn they're trying to protect, it's not just that the dogs are off the leash chasing them. It's the fact that the very scent of the dogs and everything into their areas, even if they're on a leash, is destructive to their habits and everything. So that's why they don't even want dogs in some areas, and why they want to keep them on a leash in other areas. And I'm a dog owner and let my dog off a leash on the beach. So.
So much for electrifying our
So, you know, as much as we talk about we don't want to force people to do anything, for temporary signage on public and private property, ensure all signs are removed promptly. I guess what signs are we talking about? If they're temporary, are they
Was that political signs? Maybe it's political signs?
for the elections?
Probably, to be my guess, yeah.
But you can't put a sign except on your personal property for elections, right? Isn't that the
People
rule?
do it anyway, though, yeah.
It's not enforced.
Yeah.
And as far as taking them down, you're really going to be, I don't know, it just for this group who doesn't want to force people to do anything, it just seemed a bit excessive.
Thanks, Virginia. Please, Christy, please.
Okay, so besides the political signs, which drive me crazy, because if you lose, go clean up your signs. If you win, celebrate, clean up your signs. But as a former real estate agent, we are guilty of littering the neighborhoods and not having them picked up. There's a young man that just started a business to install our signs and remove them for us for $20 a weekend. I think the point is that sometimes when you go around and there's a garage sale sign, there's a political sign, there's real estate signs, there's, I don't know, it just gets kind of junky, and it's far after the time of an election or after the open house is closed, and there's still a bunch of signs. So in the old days, we used to get them lifted, and they'd take them to the city yard, and we had to pay a fine to go get them out. So they used to enforce it for real estate agents. I don't know about the political stuff, but I think it's just to kind of keep it not looking junky, you know, and having people be personally responsible for their lawn sign. That's about it.
Thanks, Christy. Okay, do we have Jim, please?
Yeah, I can plead guilty for the dog language, which I would point out is not being proposed as a policy. It's in the narrative, which was describing steps that the city had currently or in the past taken to try to protect the environment in the river mouth. And I believe it's correct to say that the city has been trying to enforce off-leash dog ordinance that they have in that area where a problem persisted. And I would also plead guilty to suggesting adding the addition of, on handwritten page 29, policy NR-1.5, which was to continue to advocate that this is under reduced transportation-related emissions to improve air quality, and that was to continue to advocate for the phase-out of the sale of leaded aviation gasoline at John Wayne Airport, which I would think would be non-controversial because although we have no control over the airport, the leaded gas and the planes flying over Newport does have an effect on us. And some might think it's redundant to put it in here because federal or state agencies will take care of it for us, but if we're trying to reduce emissions affecting us, I thought it would be good to be there. I don't think it should be just kind of added without discussion though. So I'm pointing out that that was not reviewed by the committee, whether that should be there or not. And the only other point I would want to make about the natural resources element, which I appreciate the staff didn't have time to respond to it since the comments were requested last Monday, I think it was. And many of us see Newport Beach as a city of views, and the extent of the view protection policies in here is completely unreviewable at the moment without seeing the figures that would go with that. The current natural resources element has a figure in it identifying viewpoints that we want to protect. And one oddity of that is there are no viewpoints in Newport Beach south or east of the flower streets in Corona del Mar. The entire Newport coast has not a single viewpoint that we're concerned about. And I really think the map needs to be reevaluated.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, we have Rita, and then we need to put a motion forward, and we'll get to the last item on the agenda. Please.
I just had a question about dogs by the beach unleashed. Is it a real problem for the quality of the water and the quality of the beach? Because I do notice a lot of dogs off leash around the water, and I know places like Huntington Beach have an actual dog beach, and I think there is a very strong desire among residents to have a dog beach, just based on the optics of how many dogs are sent around the beach unleashed. I was just curious if that concept of designating a dog beach, so it's kind of in one location that can be monitored and set aside just for that purpose, came up.
Where would you suggest that be? Seriously, I've got a friend that lives down at River Jetties, and it's a 3-ring circus. Dogs make messes on the sand. Dogs chase little kids. It's a real problem, and we should have a dog park on the west side. We got kind of close a few years ago, but the council did not want to do anything about that. We've got one here, but I think it's a real problem. I wasn't trying to be smart alecky, read it, but really, where would you think it should go?
Well,
people that live there.
On the far end of Newport Shores, almost abutting Huntington Beach, there is kind of a little beach gully of something there at the very edge.
There are people that live there, right? And dogs.
There's just
dogs roam and go wherever they want to go, right? And again, a friend of mine lives there, and he said it's a nightmare.
Fair points. Paul, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my wife and I have lived in West Newport for 43 years, and we carry pepper spray when we walk on the beach or on seashore or in the alley. And we have found that off-leash dogs are, they're lovable and whatnot, and most of them are very friendly and not pose a problem, but there have been times when I've taken out the spray. I don't think I've ever utilized it, but we have it handy. So that is a problem, and we've talked, well, I can't remember who the person is now that heads up the animal control. It used to be Valerie Schramberg or something like Valerie, and so we would have Valerie come out once in a while and ask her to redouble her efforts on animal control monitoring of the west side near the river jetty. But anyway, it is a problem. Just answer Rita's good concern on the issue.
And I know that Corona Del Mar does put out signs on Little Corona and Big Corona. It'll say, dear humans, dogs only, or dogs, no dogs at this time or whatever. So I know they do regulate that. But I've definitely run down that beach 1,000 times, and I've been chased a few times. I don't know, whatever. I outroute the dogs, so it's all right. So they couldn't catch up, so it's fine, but it's good. Any other comments? Okay, we need to get a vote on this, right? To move it to the general plan steering committee?
Yeah, well, the recommended action by me as your city staff liaison would be to consider a motion to support moving this forward to the steering committee for concurrence, just like we did with the arts and culture, historical resources, and Harbor Bay and Beaches elements. And that does not exclude any potential revisions you might want to see from this discussion that we had tonight. So that would be the recommended action before you today.
Dennis, please.
I'll move it.
Thank you. We have a second. Paul? All right. Rita? Okay. You're excited. You're excited to say yes. All right. We got it. All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next item, we have item C. This is going to be, Ben's going to talk about updates and overview of upcoming deliverables, objectives, and schedules.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. So I guess a good segue from your last action is that the elements that you reviewed this evening will be redline, strikeout changes will be made, and that will be shared with the steering committee, and that's exactly what happened with the arts and culture, historical resources, and Harbor Bay and Beaches elements. So whatever changes that are made based on the discussion today will be reflected in that red line strikeout format for you in case you want to see what those look like. However, I will make an effort to send those all to the GPAC so that you're all aware of what those red line strikeout changes are in case you don't have the time to pay attention to the steering committee meeting or are not aware of when that happens. So happy to do that. But in terms of next steps, so I want to step back and say that the safety subcommittee met in June and had a very productive meeting. They ended up supporting moving that element forward. So at your next GPAC meeting, which is part of what I'd like to discuss is when that might be, you'd look to review the safety element, just as you did today, and consider moving that forward for steering committee concurrence. So previously we had talked about potentially doing 2 meetings in July. That'd be July 2nd today and July 16th. However, there's no rush to bring the safety element back. We can always delay that to the August meeting and have more business on that agenda. So just wanted to throw that out there for when you consider your next meeting. And then in the month of July, I feel like I've said this before, but we will make a good faith effort to convene the noise subcommittee with the acoustician from DUDEC, Dana Ladico. And also the land use element is just about ready to share with the land use subcommittee. So although former chair DeSantis is not here, I'll be coordinating with her on a July land use element subcommittee meeting. So those will both be taking place in July. And then again, these 2 elements this evening will be going to the steering committee for consideration. Looking in August, we will be bringing the arts and culture element as well as the historical resources element to the various committees. So the Arts Commission will get to look at that in a study session. It was also suggested by Mr. Mosier that the Board of Library Trustees be able to look at that as well. So we'll start to look at who all, in terms of boards, commissions, and committees from the city, can review these elements in draft form and provide some good, valuable feedback for you all to consider adding to the element or adjusting our language. So that's sort of the flow from here and the immediate next steps. But I would kind of look to you all for maybe a straw poll as to whether you want to reconvene later this month or if you'd prefer to just hold off and do a meeting in August.
My suggestion would be August. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. All right. So,
and that will allow time too for us to convene those other subcommittees that haven't met yet. Just since Outreach Chair Clarity is here, I will say that a reminder, we did share out the Phase 3 Outreach and Engagement Plan. I got some comments back from Mr. Baker. This kind of goes back to Mr. Fancher's comments about the elements being available. So while the draft elements have been made available as part of these agenda packets, we are not preparing to advertise them as drafts until they have been reviewed by the individual boards, commissions, and committees and are ready for public review thereafter. It doesn't seem appropriate to go out to the public prior to going to those boards, commissions, and committees. So that's sort of the flow that you can expect to see. So once, for example, Harbor Commission gets to see the Harbor Bay and Beaches element, as well as the Water Quality Coastal Tidelands Committee, and possibly the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, only then would we start to advertise and make that public for comments. Ultimately, there's a goal to have a community open house that has the entire general plan for display and advertising and soliciting comments. But the intention of this time is not to hold back until we have the entire draft general plan. It's really to start sharing those out as we go through the GPAC, steering committee, boards, committees, and commissions, and then going out to the public on sort of a rolling basis. So I know that was probably more confusing than it needed to be, but all that to say that there's still a lot of work to be had on these draft elements, and they are just that. So I would advise you to continue providing that input. If there's something that you wish you would have gotten in there, we can always add it as a public comment and bring it back for GPAC consideration. But that's really all I had in terms of an update. I'm happy to address any questions from the committee.
Probably 6 months ago, I remember that we had a lot of discussion about having experts and noted people come in, and I wonder if that's still a process. And I'm not necessarily meaning for this meeting of the whole committee, but I'm thinking about it. Is there still value in that? in the subcommittee, in these various, I'm thinking of safety. I'm thinking like, I'm not on the safety committee, so I don't follow it, but it would seem to me there might be like an airport, someone who's an expert on airport or something like that. And maybe even in our natural resources, maybe there's things that have to do with deposition from aircraft. That was referenced today. Somebody talked about that. So I'm just wondering, are we still doing that? Are we still bringing experts? Do we still plan on bringing experts in?
We could absolutely look to do that if that's what the subcommittees would like to do. I think that was probably more pertinent in sort of shaping the draft, but at the same time, if the subcommittees would like to convene to consider some subject matter experts' perspective on something, I think that's something we could absolutely do if there's value to that for you.
Okay. Jim, please. Actually, Paul first, then Jim.
Yeah, do you have a tentative date in August when we might convene?
It should be the first Wednesday of August, which I can't profess to that off the top of my head, but the first Wednesday in August. August 6th. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a super quick question? If it's been addressed, I apologize. Noise element people, Jim, and safety element people, not sure who's on that. Have you guys been addressing drones? Like, has anyone been around when there's like 5 drones in the air? It's really loud and it's really annoying, and they're just gaining in popularity. Safety also. I know that we used to have to pull a permit with the airport in order to fly a drone up within a certain, radius of the airport. I don't know if that's still in play or not. I just thought they're starting to become so prolific and so plentiful and reasonably priced for the hobbyists, let alone the professionals, that maybe that should be something that we try and address through noise and safety elements before the horse bolts the barn.
Yeah.
What was that saying?
The horse bolts the barn. You know when a horse bolts out of a barn?
Gotcha.
You can't get
Okay.
him back.
Good one. I like it.
So
Jim and then Laird, please.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. They're noisy and they're dangerous. Sorry.
Laird, you're loud, but we need to record.
Oh, okay. They're noisy and they're also dangerous. I've seen people almost get hit by one. The pilots get kind of adventurous, and they kind of want to see how close they can buzz people. And then I saw down by the Balboa Pier a couple of weeks ago somebody with one of those kite deals with an engine on the back. What are those called? Ultralight. What are they? Ultralight. Was that you, Dennis? That was. And I don't know what the rules and regulations are for those things, but this guy got real low. It looked like he was going to ram into the pier. So is that all part of this or not? Is that an FAA deal? Are the drones an FAA deal?
Thank you. Good point. Jim, please.
Yeah, for those who are not aware, at last week, I guess it was last week's city council meeting, there was a study session on what the city's response to drones should be. And I would recommend listening to that. It mostly had to do with the bigger vehicles that would carry people electrically. Yes, and it had to do with the issue of siting where those would be allowed to land and take off. And the essence of it was the city could regulate where they happened, but once they were allowed to be there, we had no further control over what happened at those sites. So that is a general plan issue. And like Dennis said, both the safety and the noise committees had discussed in the past having somebody from the airport or the city inform us about what the coming issues would be. So the comment I wanted to make, though, is following up on Dennis's comment of expectations at the beginning of the process, and Chuck's about the difficulty of the public and perhaps even some of the GPAC members following exactly what's going on. When the GPAC started, we set up on the city's Laserfish system little folders for each subcommittee and there was an expectation that the subcommittee materials were going to go in those folders, and the folders would have minutes of the meetings. And I think we kind of did that with good intentions at the very beginning, and like many good intentions, I don't think we've quite kept up with that. So people looking in those folders, actually the GPAC home page directs people to that to find out more about what the subcommittees are doing. And I think they'll be disappointed when they look there, but I don't know who I want to put the burden on of doing that.
He just took a note, so
I
he's
did.
got it covered. Thanks, Jim. Unless there's anything else, I think we can move. Yeah, Christy, please.
I think two of our friends and neighbors here from the public missed the opportunity to address an issue down on the peninsula with the new fire station and the tree. And I just think they didn't know the order in which we go.
Only if you say another slogan that we can partake in. All right, thanks. Please.
Thank you. I know I'll be so fast. We just came down to kind of just sit and witness, so I didn't even really need to talk today. But we're very concerned about the tree at the library park, and we got note of this meeting, and there was a lot of talk and written subject in the paperwork that I read through, that you went through, that talks about making sure that we have open space, that we have open parks, we have meeting areas for people in the community, and that we have lots of trees and canopy and coverage, which we have with this tree at Library Park, and we've been trying to reset the plan. According to the plan right now, the tree and the library and the fire station are all meant to be demolished, and the new library plan is to install an early childhood focused playground at the library, which I teach privately and tutor, and libraries are for reading and stuff, but anyway. So the concern is that to put in that kind of a playground would eliminate an area where the community can gather, because right now that's a grassy area where people walk their dogs, the community members meet up, the tree is nice for shade, it houses 15 to 20 great blue heron nests that are migratory, that have their babies there every year, and there was some research done by one company that came back as the tree had a fungus, which all trees have, from which they usually recover, and the percentage was very low. So that being the argument, it is possible to go around the tree and its roots in order to rebuild that library and fire station. The project can still go through, but to see all this talk about making sure we have lots of park space and lots of green area and lots of trees and lots of canopies, and then to take a huge, amazing old tree, yeah, it's 100 years old and it's healthy and it's fine and it's growing and there's like a ton of nests in it. So it kind of seems a little ridiculous to read about a bunch of plans for new parks or for creating areas that already exist in order to create a playground where it won't anymore. So
Thanks for
thank
sharing
you for
that.
listening.
Thanks,
Sorry, I know it's
thanks
late.
for coming. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Christy.
It's not the purview of this committee for the
Right.
sake of what we're planning, but I'm aware of that project. It's probably best to work with the project managers of the city. I think you've already probably been doing that.
We have.
And just for the context of the committee, that coastal development permit is appealed to the Coastal Commission, and
Right, we
it's
have an
awaiting a
appeal into
substantial
that.
issue hearing. Yes.
We do. Thank
So,
you so much.
yes.
I appreciate you taking time and making sure that I got to speak. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Where's the slogan? All right. Well. All right. All right. Well, with that being said, let's move to adjourn at 6:41 p.m. We'll be back here on Wednesday, August 6th at 5 p.m. All right. Thank you, everybody. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you.